The fruit that defeated the silent sickness in the palace. The palace that echoed. The palace stood tall on the hill, proud and glittering under the sun. Its walls were made of polished stone. Its gates were guarded by the strongest soldiers in the land. From afar, it looked like a place of joy. But inside it echoed. Not with laughter. Not with children. Only silence. The king had gold. He had armies. He had power. When he walked, drums announced his presence. When he spoke, men trembled. Yet every night, when the torches dimmed and servants withdrew, the palace changed. The dining hall felt too large. The corridors felt too long. The nursery room, built years ago, remained untouched. Dust gathered on the tiny wooden cradle carved with royal symbols. Silks meant for a prince or princess stayed folded, and used, forgotten. The king would sometimes stand at the nursery door. Just stand there, listening, as if hoping to hear a cry that never came. The queen, once radiant and full of laughter, had grown quiet. Her smiles were gentle, but tired. Her eyes carried a question no one dared to ask aloud. Years had passed. No child. The people began to whisper carefully in markets and behind closed doors. Who will sit on the throne after him? A kingdom without an heir is a kingdom walking toward darkness. The king heard the whispers, and every whisper felt like a blade. He trained harder, ate heavier meals, demanded strength from everyone around him. But strength could not defeat what he could not see. There was something creeping through the palace. Not a plague, not a visible wound, but a silent sickness. And it was growing. The king's hidden shame. The king had fought wars. He had defeated enemies twice his size. He had broken rebellions with a single command. No one had ever called him weak. But there was one battle he could not win. The battle inside his own house. The royal physicians came and went. They mixed herbs, burned incense, prayed loudly, whispered secretly. Each time they bowed and said the same words. Be patient, Your Majesty. Patience. The word tasted bitter. At night, the king would sit alone in his private chamber. His crown rested on the table. His shoulders slumped like an ordinary man. What curse is this? He would whisper. He began to fear something terrible. What if the problem was him? The thought burned his pride. So he blamed fate. He blamed the stars. He blamed the queen's body. Never himself. Meanwhile, the queen carried her sorrow silently. She drank bitter herbal mixtures that left her weak. She fasted. She prayed. She cried into pillows so no one would hear. Her body grew tired. Her heart grew heavy. And something else began to happen across the kingdom. Soldiers complained of muscle cramps. Farmers felt exhausted before noon. Children caught small illnesses too often. The elderly whispered about strange weakness in their bones. It was subtle, quiet, unnoticed. The king dismissed it. People are lazy, he declared. But deep inside, he felt something slipping beyond his control. A kingdom can survive enemies. But can it survive weakness? The silent sickness was spreading, and pride was feeding it, the fruit of rumors. One afternoon, disguised in a plain cloak, the king walked through the marketplace. He wanted to hear the truth of his people. Markets never lie. Women bargained loudly. Traders displayed their goods. Children ran between stalls. But something was missing. No bright yellow. No curved golden fruit hanging in bunches. Bananas. He noticed the empty spaces where they once were sold in abundance. Then he heard it. An old woman speaking softly to a young mother. Give your husband bananas. It will strengthen him. And your children too. It builds the body. Another trader added, it strengthens the heart, stops cramps, even balances the body for women who struggle to conceive. The king froze. Conceive. The word struck him like thunder. He stepped closer without revealing himself. Bananas are a gift, the old woman continued. Full of life, energy, healing. The king's jaw tightened. How dare they suggest a fruit could solve what royal medicine could not? Anger rose, not at the fruit, but at the possibility that something so simple might hold power he did not control. That night, he could not sleep. The whispers replayed in his mind. Strength. Healing. Life. The next morning, Fury made his decision for him. If the people place their hope in a fruit, he declared before the court, then that fruit threatens the throne. Gasps filled the hall. From this day forward, he roared, bananas are forbidden in my kingdom. And with that command, the golden fruit disappeared. But when you ban a gift of nature, nature does not stay silent. The ban that starved the kingdom. The order was carried out before sunset. Guards moved through farms and markets like a storm. Banana trees were cut down. Bunches of ripe fruit were seized and burned in the palace courtyard. The sweet smell of roasting bananas filled the air, not as food, but as warning. Anyone caught hiding them would be punished. Fear spread faster than fire. Farmers who had depended on banana harvests for steady income watched their trees fall like soldiers in battle. Mothers who once mashed bananas for their babies now stared at empty bowls. Workers who relied on the fruit for quick strength during long hours in the sun began to feel the difference almost immediately. At first it was small. A mason paused more often while lifting stones. A guard rubbed his calves at night, complaining of painful cramps. A trader closed her stall early because she felt too tired to continue. The royal physicians blamed the heat. But the heat had always been there. Days turned into weeks. Without the natural energy the fruit once provided, the people felt drained. Meals became heavier, harder to digest. Constipation and stomach pain became common complaints. Tempers grew shorter. Smiles faded quicker. Even the soldiers guarding the palace gates no longer stood as firmly as before. Inside the palace, the queen's weakness deepened. The herbal mixtures were harsh on her stomach. She could barely finish her meals. Her once bright eyes dimmed, and dark circles began to form beneath them. The king noticed, but pride refused to connect the dots. The silent sickness was not dramatic. It did not kill suddenly. It drained slowly. It weakened quietly. And now the entire kingdom was starving, not from lack of food, but from lack of something simple, something yellow. Something banned. Cracks in the crown. The first public collapse happened during the harvest parade. It was meant to display strength. Soldiers marched in shining armor. Drums echoed across the capital. The king stood tall on the palace balcony, determined to show his people that the kingdom was still powerful. Then it happened. One soldier stumbled. Another followed. A third dropped his spear, clutching his leg in pain as a sharp cramp seized him. Gasps rippled through the crowd. The formation broke. The once mighty royal guard looked fragile. The king's jaw tightened. Discipline them, he barked. But discipline could not restore potassium to weaken muscles. That evening, reports flooded the palace. Farmers unable to finish fieldwork. Laborers fainting under the sun. Children missing school due to constant minor illnesses. The royal physician approached cautiously. Your Majesty, the body needs certain nutrients to remain strong. Potassium for the heart. Fiber for digestion. Vitamin B6 for brain and mood balance. The king's voice turned cold. Are you suggesting the forbidden fruit? The physician bowed lower. I am suggesting something is missing. The king dismissed him. But that night, he felt it too. A strange flutter in his chest. A brief dizziness when he stood up. A heaviness in his limbs he had never known before. He gripped the edge of his table. Not weakness. Anything but weakness. Yet the cracks were forming. Not in the walls of the palace, but in the crown itself. The queen's breaking point. The queen could no longer hide it. Her hands trembled while pouring tea. Her appetite faded. The herbal tonics meant to cure her left her bloated and uncomfortable. She struggled with digestion, often awake at night from stomach discomfort. One evening she fainted. The palace froze. Servants screamed. Guards rushed in. The king carried her to the royal chambers himself, his heart pounding harder than ever before. When she awoke, her voice was barely a whisper. I feel empty, she said. Not just in her womb. In her strength. In her joy. In her hope. The old healer, who had been watching the kingdom's decline quietly, requested an audience. She was small, wrinkled.
Come.
She carried a woven basket. Inside it, hidden beneath cloth, bananas. She did not kneel in fear. She looked at the queen with compassion. "Your body is not cursed," she said softly. "It is tired. It lacks balance. It lacks strength." The king's anger flared instantly. "Take that forbidden fruit away." But the healer did not flinch. "Your Majesty," she said gently, "sometimes pride blocks healing." The room fell silent. The queen looked at the fruit as if seeing sunlight after months of rain. Hope. Fragile. Dangerous. Beautiful. And for the first time since the ban, the king hesitated. The silent sickness had reached the palace doors, and it was knocking louder than ever. The first bite of defiance. The room was heavy with tension. The king stood near the window, his back turned. The healer still held the basket. The queen lay weak against her pillows, her breathing soft but uneven. "Take it away," the king repeated, though his voice had lost some of its fire. The healer did not move. Instead, she slowly peeled one banana. The soft scent filled the chamber, sweet, gentle, alive. The queen's eyes followed the movement. Her stomach tightened, not in pain this time, but in longing. For strength. For relief. For something natural. "Your Majesty," the healer said quietly, "this fruit carries natural sugars that restore energy. Potassium strengthens the heart. Fiber eases digestion. It is not magic. It is nourishment." The king remained silent. The queen pushed herself up slightly. Her hands trembled as she reached forward. One bite. The room felt as if it stopped breathing. The sweetness melted on her tongue. Her body, so long denied balance, seemed to recognize it instantly. Warmth spread slowly through her chest. Not dramatic, not explosive, but real. Tears rolled down her cheeks. Not from pain, from relief. The king turned. For a moment he saw not rebellion but hope. The healer spoke again, softer this time. "Healing does not shout. It whispers, but you must allow it." The king said nothing. He did not order the guards. He did not shout. He simply watched as the queen finished the fruit. That night, she slept peacefully for the first time in months. And in the darkness, the king lay awake.
Listening.
Not for a child's cry, but for change. Strength in silence. The next morning, something small but undeniable happened. The queen woke before her attendants arrived. She sat up without dizziness. She asked for breakfast. Real breakfast. The servants stared in shock. Her appetite, once gone, had returned gently. Her stomach felt calmer. The heavy bloating that had haunted her for weeks had softened. The healer returned with more bananas. "Consistency restores balance," she explained. "The body rebuilds itself slowly." Each day, the queen ate one in the morning. Energy returned gradually. Her steps grew firmer. The faint glow returned to her skin. The dark shadows under her eyes began to fade. But the king noticed something else.
Her mood changed.
She laughed once, a soft sound, but enough to freeze the palace staff in surprise. Vitamin B6 was quietly supporting her brain. Tryptophan was helping her body produce serotonin. Her heart, once burdened by sadness and stress, felt lighter. The king watched carefully. His own chest still fluttered occasionally. His legs still cramped at night. He said nothing. But when no one was looking, he touched one of the bananas left on the table. His pride wrestled with his fear. What if something so simple truly held the answer? The silent sickness had begun to retreat in the queen. And for the first time, the king wondered if he had been fighting the wrong enemy all along. The king's secret trial. That night, when the palace slept, the king made a decision no one would witness. He dismissed his guards early. He locked his chamber doors. On the table before him lay a single banana. It looked harmless, almost mocking. He picked it up slowly. "This changes nothing," he muttered to himself. But his hands betrayed him. They trembled slightly. He peeled it. The scent was familiar from childhood, from simpler days before crowns and expectations. He hesitated only a second before taking a bite. Sweetness.
Softness.
Simplicity. He expected lightning. A miracle. Something dramatic. But nothing dramatic came. Only calm. The next morning he felt less heavy. His chest fluttered less. His muscles did not cramp during his morning sword practice. It could be coincidence, he told himself. So, he ate another the next day. And another. Within a week, the dizziness reduced. His focus sharpened. His temper softened slightly. The invisible pressure inside his body seemed to ease. The healer watched quietly from a distance. The king had not lifted the ban, but the fruit had entered the palace. And now hope was growing. The king breaks. The king entered the queen's chamber slowly. He did not wear his crown. He did not wear armor. He looked at her, truly looked at her, and saw strength.
Glow.
Life returning to her eyes. "You are certain?" he asked the physician. "Yes, your majesty." The king fell to his knees. Not from weakness. From humility. For years he had fought enemies with swords. He had blamed fate, blamed whispers, blamed everything but himself. Now he understood. The body thrives on balance. On nourishment. On simple, consistent care. The bananas had restored more than muscle strength. They had supported her hormones, her digestion, her mood, her heart. They had reduced stress in both of them. They had allowed the body to function the way it was created to. The silent sickness had been in balance. And pride had fed it. The king took the queen's hand carefully, as if she were made of glass. "I almost destroyed what could save us," he whispered. The queen smiled gently. "But you chose to listen." Outside, the news began to spread. First as rumor, then as certainty. The palace was no longer silent. Something sacred was forming within its walls. The kingdom reborn. By the time the banana trees bore fruit again, the entire kingdom felt transformed. Markets were colorful once more. Children ran with sticky fingers from sweet snacks. Workers carried bunches of bananas to the fields for energy during long hours under the sun. The results were undeniable. Fewer complaints of cramps. Stronger heartbeats. Better digestion. Improved moods. The healer's hut became quieter. Not because she left, but because fewer people needed urgent help. Inside the palace, the queen's pregnancy progressed steadily. She remained strong, nourished daily. The royal physician emphasized balanced meals, rest, and the continued inclusion of bananas to support energy and nutrient needs. The king became different too.
Softer.
Wiser. He began visiting farms personally, encouraging the planting of fruit trees across the land. "This kingdom will never starve from pride again," he declared. The people loved him more for his humility than they ever had for his strength. And as months passed, the palace prepared. The nursery was cleaned. The cradle polished. Silks unfolded at last. For the first time in years, laughter echoed through the halls. The silent sickness had been defeated, not by magic, but by understanding. Yet one final moment awaited. The moment that would shatter the last echo of silence forever. The night of pain and promise. The night arrived without warning. The moon hung low and full above the palace, silver light washing over the banana groves that now surrounded the kingdom like a protective crown. Inside the royal chamber, the queen gripped the sheets tightly. "It is time," the midwife whispered. The king's heart pounded harder than it ever had in battle. This was not a war he could fight with swords. The queen had remained strong throughout her pregnancy. Nourished. Balanced. Her body had been supported, not starved, not strained. Bananas had remained part of her daily meals, steady energy sustaining her through the months. But childbirth is no small storm. Pain came in waves. The queen cried out, not in fear, but in fierce determination. The king stood near the doorway, helpless. Every sound cut through him. Every pause made him stop breathing. Outside, the people sensed something sacred unfolding. Many stayed awake, praying under the stars. Hours passed. The midwife spoke calmly, encouraging strength.
Breathe.
Your body knows what to do. The queen held on to those words. Her body was no longer weak. Her heart was steady. Her spirit was calm. Then, just before dawn, a cry.
Sharp. Clear. Alive.
The palace froze. The silent sickness shattered in that single sound. The king collapsed to his knees again, but this time with laughter breaking through tears.
A child.
Strong lungs. Strong heartbeat. The silence that haunted the palace for years was gone. And, in its place, life. The first morning of joy. Morning sunlight poured into the nursery that had once gathered dust. Now it held warmth. The baby lay wrapped in royal cloth, tiny fingers curling and uncurling as if testing the world. The queen looked radiant, exhausted, but glowing with fulfillment. Her strength had carried her through. Her body, once doubted, had proven powerful. The royal physician checked both mother and child. Healthy, he announced. The king held his child carefully, as if holding a miracle made of glass. He studied the small face and felt something deeper than pride. Gratitude. He remembered the day he had ordered banana trees cut down. He remembered the burning fruit. He remembered the fear that had guided him. And he understood fully now. Nourishment is not weakness. It is wisdom. The baby cried again, louder this time, and instead of echoing emptiness, the palace walls returned the sound with joy. Servants wept openly. Guards smiled without hiding it. Outside, bells rang through the kingdom. The people cheered. The barren king was barren no more. And neither was his land. A lesson to the kingdom. Days later, the king stood before his people once more, this time with his child in his arms. The crowd filled the square. Banana trees lined the streets, heavy with golden fruit. "My people," the king began, his voice steady but emotional. "We were not cursed. We were unbalanced." He raised a banana for all to see. This simple fruit reminded us that health is the foundation of strength. Potassium for the heart, fiber for digestion, energy for work, nutrients for the mind. He paused. "I once believed power meant control, but true power is understanding what sustains life." The crowd listened in silence, not fearful silence, but respectful silence. He continued, "Let this child grow in a kingdom that values wisdom over pride." Cheers erupted like thunder. The healer stood quietly at the edge of the crowd, smiling. She had never sought recognition, only balance. The silent sickness had been defeated not by force, but by humility, nourishment, and courage to change. The fields of gold. Seasons passed. The banana groves flourished across the kingdom. Their broad green leaves danced in the wind like banners of renewal. Farmers reported higher strength during harvest. Workers lasted longer, without exhaustion. Children grew healthier and more energetic. Complaints of cramps and digestive troubles became rare. The fruit became more than food. It became a symbol. Markets glowed with yellow abundance. Mothers mashed bananas for their babies. Athletes carried them before training. Elders recommended them for heart health. The king ensured agricultural education spread throughout the land. Balanced diets were taught in schools. Nutrition became part of royal policy. The kingdom was not only richer in gold, it was richer in health. Because the lesson was never forgotten. The cry that changed everything. Years later, the king stood once more in the nursery, now filled with laughter, toys, and sunlight. He remembered the silence. He remembered the emptiness. He remembered the pride. And he remembered the first cry that broke it all. That cry had not only announced a child, it had announced awakening. The fruit that once burned in the palace courtyard now grew proudly at its gates. Simple, common, powerful. The kingdom learned a truth that would echo for generations. Never despise what seems small. Sometimes, the cure to the greatest silence is hanging quietly on a tree.